So I'm doing a bonus episode this month as well for everyone, just because I wanted to talk about one of my favorite actors who passed away recently. It has nothing to do with the Christmas Carol, but well, as of recording it this week, might be a little later when it comes out, but this week we lost Robert Duvall, one of the greatest actors of all time in film. As far as I'm concerned, he was just an unbelievable talent, gave us six decades of wonderful performances, started in the 1960s in To Kill a Mockingbird, and his last film was in 2021 or 2022, I believe. The amount of all-time great films he appeared in was touched by very few. You look at the list of the greatest films of the 70s, and you look at the Robert Duvall filmography of the 70s, it's that meme from The Office. They're the same photo. It's just, he was in so many all-time classics and well after that as well. But you just look at his 70s run and it's untouchable. So this is an actor who I've really, really loved for a long time. I think he's always brought something special to each role he played, even in movies that maybe weren't great. So I just wanted to talk a little more off the cuff than usual. I mean, I have some notes in front of me, but I'm going to be a little more free with this, just talking about some of my favorite Robert Duvall performances. Obviously everyone's going to have their favorites, and I'm not just talking about what are objectively the greatest, because what does that even mean? And it's not going to be what are the greatest movies he was in, because that'd be a very different list as well. This is just, in my opinion, the 10 greatest Robert Duvall performances on film. So not counting any of his TV work here. I know that Lonesome Dove, a TV miniseries he did, he often called his favorite role, and I know he really, really loved that. Always brought it up. He said he could retire after playing that part. uh, That'd be a different thing. I'm just talking about theatrical films here. Also, his episode of The Twilight Zone is fantastic miniatures. Maybe the first thing I ever saw him in. I'm not quite sure. I can't honestly remember what I first saw him in, but it might honestly have been his episode of The Twilight Zone. So if you haven't seen that, obviously check it out. It's a great episode. It's from that brief stint where they were doing hour-long episodes, and yeah, he's incredible. But just going to talk about his film work here, and I have a list of my 10 favorites. If they're not yours, I get it. He's been in so many films and so many incredible performances. I'll give some honorable mentions at the end here too. Yeah, we're going to talk about my 10 favorite Robert Duvall performances on film. Starting at number 10, Civil Action from 1998. The 1990s, they had a lot of legal thrillers, many John Grisham adaptations, many movies that wanted you to think they were John Grisham adaptations. There was a legal thriller with Satan in it. It was a decade of many, many courtroom dramas, and I kind of enjoy this genre no matter what. Even if they're not great, I tend to have a soft spot for them. I'm not going to act like A Civil Action is a masterpiece of the genre or anything. It's a perfectly serviceable legal thriller about John Travolta playing an attorney who defends the parents whose kids have been poisoned by bad drinking water in a river. As the movie basically sets out to say, it's not sexy, it's not fun, but it's still meaningful work, and he does find some meaning in it by the end of the film. Robert Duvall plays the attorney on the other side, Jerry Thatcher, and who I believe was a real person. I know the story is based on true events. Duvall is just incredible here. He has one of those classic opening scenes where he's on his lunch break and he gets another attorney brings him some files, and he kind of dresses him down a bit. It's very entertaining, very funny, and he has some great scenes with Travolta throughout the movie. He really has some great, wonderful chemistry with John Travolta in all their scenes together. There's a scene where they're walking in a park, and Duvall kind of gives him a realistic version of a movie villain speech. It doesn't feel like screenwritery. It doesn't feel fake, but it's very much how a character like this, who's very, well spoken, well read, would present this kind of thing of, yeah, I'm going to win this. There's a really great scene where they're talking outside the courtroom as well. So some fantastic moments between the two of them. Good supporting cast in this one too. James Gandolfini, year before The Sopranos, probably during the filming of the pilot around that time. He's one of the parents, and he's amazing in this film. He always brought so much. And there's a great little cameo by Sidney Pollack near the end as well, who's really, really intimidating in the same way he kind of is in Eyes Wide Shut. So, yeah, like I said, it's by no means a great movie, but Duvall's cold menace, intelligence, intimidation is endlessly watchable. And yeah, the scenes with him and Travolta are a lot of fun. And I cannot make this up. It sounds like something I'd make up, but this film, a serious legal drama about poison drinking water and the children who died because of it, has a needle drop over the ending credits to the Talking Heads cover of Take Me to the River. Yeah. Number nine, Get Low from 2009. So this is a fairly small film that Duvall made in 2009, where he plays Felix Bush, an old man during the Great Depression who has kind of lived by himself on a mountain for most of his life. And the townsfolk of the small town where he lives kind of have their rumors about him, but no one quite knows what happens. There's some people in town who knew him when he was younger. And then one day he just kind of up and disappeared, stayed nearby, but cut himself off from everybody. And the movie is about him one day that he's getting up in age, as Duvall was in this point, even though he lived, 15 good years after this. Plus, he says, "Hey, I'm going to have a funeral while I'm still alive. I'm going to talk about all the things I haven't talked about all my life." You've got Bill Murray as a funeral home director, very subtle performance from him. And then Lucas Black as his coworker at the funeral home. Also has Sissy Spacek as a townsperson that Duvall's character knew in childhood, and then a great little performance by the character actor Bill Cobbs as a minister. Mostly, this movie works in the small moments. Duvall, with an incredibly subtle actor. Obviously, we'll get to some of the performances where he's big and bombastic, but little facial expressions, little character moments, smiles, winks, things like that. Just he embodied these characters fully. And yeah, even in something like this, which by the time the revelation of the movie comes around, it's not all that exciting. Definitely not something worth holding on to for 60 years, but I do realize that's the point. The point is that it wasn't that big of a deal. You shouldn't have held on to this. But the whole movie is, what's the big reveal going to be? And it's not something that big. That's not surprising knowing this kind of movie. It's pretty cut and dry, but it's still an enjoyable movie because of those small moments. Little humorous moments here and there. Again, Bill Murray and Lucas Black at the funeral home have some great moments. I think it's a good supporting cast as well. But it's mostly because of Duvall in the lead role as someone who you genuinely believe has lived alone for this long. So I think when it comes to Duvall's performance, this was probably his last lead role. Definitely his last major lead role in anything. I think he would have been pushing 80 when he made this. So that's pretty impressive that he was still doing this. And he still had years of films after this. He had an Oscar nomination after this. But in terms of leading roles, this was probably his last hurrah in that. And it's really a good one. Number eight, The Godfather. Yep, I know. He did so many great films and gave so many great performances that The Godfather is at number eight. But keep in mind, it's just Godfather 1. Obviously, he plays Tom Hagen, the attorney of the Corleone family and an adoptive brother, although not legally, of Michael, Sonny, Fredo, and Connie. And Duvall, who later in life, I think, didn't really ever have much of a typecast, but he often got cast as cowboys, Southerners, things like that. We sometimes might forget that he was this very a new Hollywood actor and he was very urbane. And Tom Hagen is like the definitive that kind of role for Duvall. Just this very intelligent, cold, collected, and even conniving kind of character. Very intelligent and even thoughtful in moments. He's very human in this. He has some really wonderful he has some really wonderful scenes. The chemistry between him and James Caan is very real. Obviously, they were great friends, and they made The Rain People before this as well. They had been friends even before that, and yeah, very believable brother-like chemistry between them. Obviously, it has the famous scene where he goes to the producer. I don't need to tell you all the scenes that he's in the movie, but yeah, he's great with Jack Walsh, the producer. The scene I think of most for Duvall in this movie is after Sonny dies and he has to talk to Don about it. And he's going toe to toe with Brando. And it's an emotional scene, very sad. And we see it just how much of a member of the family he is in that scene when he's breaking the news to his father. And it's a beautiful scene. I don't think Duvall was someone who got very sentimental about his work. He definitely didn't like talking about his process, things like that. But you could tell when he talked about The Godfather that was the highlight of his life working with Brando. Like that clearly meant so much to him, and he was having so much fun. And he always would talk about that, even though he wasn't, like I said, someone to get nostalgic, sentimental. It was he approached it like work, I think, and he was proud of his work, obviously. But I don't think he was sentimental in the same way some actors are. But about Brando, he definitely seemed to have that approach of this is really truly a highlight that I get to work with this guy who inspired me, and they're great together. So, yeah, I know for most people it's probably going to be even higher, but The Godfather, number eight. Moving on to another Tom, number seven, True Confessions as Detective Tom Spilacey. This is an early 1980s neo-noir movie with Duvall and Robert De Niro playing brothers. Duvall's a police detective, De Niro is a priest, and it's based on the Black Dahlia. Not it's inspired by the Black Dahlia. I won't say it's based on it because you hear based on a true story. None of these are real people in this movie, but it does take inspiration from that case. Duvall, again, playing the police detective investigating the murder, and he has to deal with the fact that his brother, who's a priest, has some connections to the people who are involved in it. And that's hard for him to come to terms with, obviously. Fantastic supporting cast in this. Uh, Amazing performance by Charles Durning. You got Burgess Meredith and a bunch of others. But those two in particular really do a great job here as well. Duvall obviously makes a lot of sense as a police detective in the 1940s. It's familiar territory for him, but I think this is a very underrated movie in general. It's beautiful to look at, gorgeous outdoor scenes in particular. And it's a very compelling movie. It's dark, it's twisted. Obviously, it's a Black Dahlia movie, but De Niro very against type. I think I heard they wanted him for the police detective role originally, which makes sense. That might be more what you'd expect, and then they cast him as the priest instead because thought that was more interesting. They brought Duvall on to play Detective Spilacey, which I think is great casting. He fits that kind of snarky detective model really, really well. So and very world weary. It's fantastic. I think this is one of the lesser known movies on this list. It's not like it's obscure, but I revisited this one not too long ago and really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, True Confessions. Number six, Network, Frank Hackett. Weirdly, Duvall is the only major player in this film who didn't get an Oscar nomination. It's one of the most nominated films for actors of all time. Duvall plays one of the network heads, and he is giving probably his most bombastic performance ever, even more than Apocalypse Now. He's just so comedically over the top, and it's a very bold and bombastic, over the top movie. It's entertaining. But it's interesting seeing Duvall do that when so many of his characters are again the Tom Hagen model. So here he's completely going for it, and it's extremely entertaining. And it's the kind of movie that calls for it. But there's something in the way he presents himself with the anger and the yelling that we get the sense isn't really who the guy is. Like he wants to be a tough guy, but he isn't. There's a famous scene, and if you haven't seen Stephen Colbert's interview with Robert Duvall, they talk about this scene. It's a really lovely interview. Just a few years ago, he got to interview him. They talked about this scene where he fires Max Schumacher, played by William Holden, and he just keeps like adding insult to insult. It's like, you're fired. I want you out by noon. No, I want you out before noon. The way he's yelling in this scene in particular, it just we get the impression this is not how the guy would be in real life in a different situation. But in this messed up world of network TV, he has to present himself as this angry kind of guy. And it sounds unnatural and it should. And it's a really funny scene. But yeah, there's that thing deep down of this isn't really who he is, but he's accepted that he has to be this guy. And I think it's a really interesting nuance to the character. Maybe a lot of people miss that. I also absolutely love the final scene of this movie. I know Faye Dunaway has said it's the favorite scene of her career. where they're all sitting around the network heads and they're talking about Howard Beale, who's the presumably the protagonist of the movie. It's an ensemble, but he's the most remembered character for sure. He has the network show, news show that's turned into a circus, and his ratings have slipped. So he realized the show has to go off the air. I realize I'm spoiling one of the most talked about films of all time. So if you haven't seen it, go see it and come back. But anyway, so they're sitting around talking about it, and his ratings have slipped, needs to go off the air. And Duvall's character says, "All right, we got to kill Howard Beale." And you're like, "Yeah, okay, sure." They're canceling his show, and without even breathing, Faye Dunaway says, "Okay, I know some assassins, great." And they just murder him live on air, and it's just that kind of satire, how coldly that is ordered at the end of this film, and it's just it happens as they're talking about it. The way the scene is edited, it cuts back and forth with them talking about it to the audience coming in for the episode. It's the best scene in the movie, but it's a great movie. Not perfect, but the stuff that is good makes it incredible. And that final scene is one of the main reasons why. And yeah, Duvall and Dunaway, all their scenes together are just fantastic work. But that scene in particular is just amazing. So, network. Okay, you got five left here. Number five, Tender Mercies. This is, if you follow the Academy Awards, you'll know the only film he ever won an Oscar for. Won Best Actor in a Leading Role for playing Max Sledge, a country singer who's kind of fallen on hard times, alcoholism, and who tries to get his life back in order. Directed by Bruce Beresford. He's known for films that, to be nice, I'd say are somewhat sentimental. People who wouldn't be so nice might say they're sappy, but this doesn't quite slip into that, and it's mostly because of Duvall. He brings a grit to this movie that could be so saccharine just because he's Robert Duvall. He has that grit. You believe he's done all the hard living we're told that the character has done. We don't see the hard living. It's not that kind of movie. It's post hard living. We believe he's done it because he brings that edge just by being himself. And that's the kind of actor he was. He moves into home, he rents a room, works for a widow played by Tess Harper, who's also wonderful in this. She's a great actress. And they fall in love, even though they've led very different lives, and she's a lot younger than him. But yeah, they hit it off. He bonds with her son, which is really sweet. There's some lovely moments between Duvall and the little boy in this. And then his old life does eventually come calling a bit. It's not necessarily a great film. It's a good film, but Duvall is so good in it and so fully inhabits this character in a way that I don't think anyone else could have quite in the same way, that it elevates it very much. Duvall famously said that he was only going to do this movie if he could do his own singing. And you listen to the soundtrack album, which I recommend if you even if you haven't seen the movie, you're just curious. I do recommend the soundtrack album. And he's not like a classically good singer, but he has this weathered kind of voice where you believe he'd have a following, right? Like so many great singer songwriters, country folk, whatever, who have that kind of raspy, edgy voice. You believe he'd have a following. He has very deep character in his voice. So it works. And I'm glad they let him do his own singing, even though someone else might have said, no, we got to dub this. So he made the right call there. There are other great supporting actors in this too. Wilford Brimley's in there. Ellen Barkin, who plays his daughter. It's not the best movie about country music. I mean, that's obviously Nashville, but this is a again, like I said about Get Low, it's a small character-driven piece, and it's a very strong central performance by Duvall, a well-deserved Oscar. He was friends with, I believe, a good number of country music artists who were fans of his work, and they helped him with his film. He was friends with like the Crashes, and I think Dolly Parton. You see when he wins his Oscar, she's very happy for him. Clearly, they inspired his genuineness in this role. Okay, number four, The Godfather Part Two. And second Godfather film, Duvall has, well, he probably has about the same amount to do, but I find his character so much more interesting here. There's so many moving pieces in that first film, and that's one of the reasons it's great. Obviously, it's a huge film and it all holds together and it's a masterpiece. But in this film, tragedy is really emphasized. There's so many fewer people from the start who are still around, and there's even fewer by the end, obviously. And I think the scenes Duvall gets in this film just really let his character shine. It's not just how are we getting to the next plot point, it's this character who has lived in this family for so long, and even by the end of this film starts to realize that even he's expendable, which is tragic. I mean, Michael loses his one brother in the first film and one brother in this film, and we see him and Tom starting to be on the outs at the end of this film. It never gets followed up on because for years there was no sequel at all, and there was never intended to be. But then they paid enough money and Coppola needed it, so they made a third one. And I'm a bigger Godfather 3 defender than most people. And even I can't argue that it would have been so much better if they had brought him back because it's Robert Duvall. But I still think there's enough at the end of this film where you can see where that relationship's headed, like all of Michael's other relationships. He's just that kind of person. He loses everyone eventually. He's so subtly sad in this. Like there's a reveal at the end of this movie how far Duvall's character has fallen when Michael tears into him and for just going to a job interview or being considered for a job in Vegas. And he's like, you can take your wife and you can take your mistress. We've had no indication that he's had a mistress the whole movie. Obviously, he's not the protagonist, but it's just this little added thing to show that he's just as screwed up as everybody else. That he's not, his family life isn't good despite how he presents, how everyone else presents. There's another great scene with Michael's wife Kay in this movie where she feels like a prisoner. Tom Hagen has to tell her that no, you can't actually go shopping in public. You give us the list, we'll go get what you need. And she said she feels like a prisoner, obviously. And he says that that's not how we look at it. And it's such a pathetic line, and he doesn't buy it as he's saying it. But it's just one of those perfect deliveries that sticks with me. There's certain lines, a line delivery that it's extra powerful because of the actor delivering it, and that's one of those for me. And obviously the big scene in this movie for him is his final scene with Frank Pentangeli, who has turned government witness, and their final scene of reflecting on the good old days, but also him telling him basically that he has to end this now or his family's not going to get taken care of. So it's this really sad, tragic scene in light of, again, many working pieces in this movie like the first. But there's this human, sad moment between old friends that's just heartbreaking, where things aren't the same. They're never going to be the same again. And it's just an amazing scene as they're walking together, talking about all the years they spent working for the family. Yeah, and for that scene alone, he should have been nominated for this movie. I realized three actors from this movie were nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and Duvall was for the first, but he should have been for this too. I think it's a more interesting character here, and I think everything about Godfather 2 is more interesting than the first, and the first is an incredible movie. But yeah, the second is so much more human and tragic, and Duvall plays that tragedy really, really well. Obviously against Pacino, who's credible as well. So yeah, Godfather 2. Number three probably won't be this high on most people's lists. Falling Down from 1993. A very misunderstood movie if there ever was one. Uh, Falling Down is about a government worker played by Michael Douglas who is told he's no longer needed at his job. So he goes on a crime spree across Los Angeles and gets more and more unhinged as the day goes on. And we begin to learn more about him that suggests maybe he was just always this way. He wants to blame certain conditions for what he's doing, but the truth might point otherwise. And Duvall plays Martin Prendergast, the detective who's investigating the crimes. And he starts out as a supporting character in the film. As the film goes on, he is just as important to the story as Michael Douglas. Basically, they swap roles by the end, and Duvall's character is essentially the protagonist. Duvall's character is the old cliche. I know, a cop on his last day. It's the biggest cliche in the book, and the movie is very aware of this. The cops are making fun of it being a cliche. But what I find so brilliant about both this character and this performance is how it really deconstructs, and that's an overused term, but it deconstructs the idea of the desk jockey kind of policeman. He stays at the desk. He doesn't want to get hurt. He doesn't want to harm himself. He just wants to do his job and go home. And we learn he's had some tragedy in his life as well. He lost a child. He has a wife who's never gotten over that. It's not a great marriage due to the mental health issues that have come on from losing a child so young, which is completely understandable. What we do see with Prendergast is what a kind, sympathetic, caring man he is compared to every other cop in the department, save one who's his partner. They are all just these bigoted, cruel, unpleasant hotshots, and they all hate him. It's not one of those like, oh, the old ways were better and the new ones are. No, we get the impression he was kind of always this way. But when he gets to actually take on this case and start investigating, we see him really spring into action, but not in the way you'd expect, right? You'd expect him to be suddenly he's a tough guy. Suddenly he's going after criminals like all the, Dirty Harry kind of cop. Not at all. He gets his man by being empathetic and caring to each person he comes across. He does smart work. He doesn't try to beat things out of people, doing it the right way. And I think when we look at, obviously, this was made in light of Rodney King in the 90s, other police incidents, and obviously more relevant than ever today. When we look at the system of policing in America and how awful it is, and here's someone who is going against every single thing that he was probably taught, taking kindness and empathy into solving this case. And he has empathy for Michael Douglas's character, something that most other people wouldn't have because they've been through similar things. He says it, doesn't give you the right to do what you did today, but clearly he feels bad for this guy. He wants it to be completely non-violent. But I think what's really telling about Duvall in this, there's just a specific scene that sticks with me when he figures out Douglas's character, who goes by defense, it's on his license plate, and he figures out that this defense guy was at one of the places. He just turned to a shop owner he's been asking some questions to, and he just says defense. Like he's really excited that he's solving the case. Like it's incredibly charming and kind of dorky. That's not a gear you usually see from Duvall, but I really love that scene. It's so human. He's like so much fun getting to do this, and he's still doing it the right way, but he's having such a good time. The other great detail of this is his relationship with his partner, Sandra, played by Rachel Ticotin. He's the only person we see in the movie, at least, who respects her completely. It's never played as anything romantic or even fatherly, really. He just respects her as a good cop, even though there's age difference and everything. It's just very respectful. Have a wonderful lunch scene together. You get the impression of they've had a wonderful working relationship for years. Incredibly sweet. They have incredible chemistry as co-workers. Yeah, it's such an incredibly touching performance, and I'm moved more by it every time I revisit this film because it's a shocking film, and it's got some problems. I think some of the way the minorities are played is not great, but the greater points it's trying to make about toxic masculinity. Look at all the cops around him and the guy he's investigating versus this very soft, caring, empathetic man. And he's the one who gets it at the end. That he figures it out. He respects his partner. He respects women. He respects everybody. And he's the person who figures out what's going on. And I think that messaging is lovely. It's really beautiful. Well done. There are some, like I said, there are some flaws with this movie. Don't go in expecting it to be perfect, but the stuff that works is phenomenal. So yeah, Martin Prendergast in Falling Down, probably the most underrated Robert Duvall character. Number two, Apocalypse Now. If we're talking what's the best movie he was ever in, top of the list, easy. But talking best performances, and he gives in Apocalypse Now one of the definitive supporting performances in film. He appears completely dominates the movie for a short period, disappears, you never see him again. That fits the nature of the movie, obviously, as Martin Sheen and company are going downriver, deeper and deeper into the metaphorical circles of hell. Bill Kilgore, his character, is this really bombastic lieutenant who is everything that's wrong with, we'll just say the American military, but particularly in Vietnam, their approach to everything. But it's not one of those movies where we just see one character who's the villain of the military, then everyone else is great. No, it's clearly a systemic issue. He's just one of many. Obviously, the other military characters we meet in this movie are more menacing, actually, the ones we meet at the beginning. Kilgore's just a blowhard, but obviously he has the famous lines that people quote to this day. Duvall was not the first choice for this role. I know that Coppola wanted somebody who was physically imposing, of course. It makes sense when you read this character on page, but when you see Duvall's performance, you can't picture anybody else. He convinced him to give him the part. No one would have played this like he did. He is racist and hot-headed and hot-blooded, thinks he's being paternalistic at points, both probably to the Vietnamese and also to his own men, but still has these human moments too, right? Like he's still, even though he's very much the best kind of one note character. I don't want to say that he's not a one note character because he is. He has that defining character trait of being a bombastic, cruel general, but he still feels like a human being, and that's what Robert Duvall brings to it. I think he had an issue with one or two scenes that got cut, and I've seen the extended cut, and I have when we talked about Muppet Christmas Carol, I said I have no nuance on whether the version with Love Is Gone or without Love Is Gone is better. Yeah, I have even less on whether the extended cut of Apocalypse Now or the original cut, and I don't talk about the other cut. Don't know what he was thinking with that, but anyway, he's such a character that leaves an impression on you throughout the whole movie. He represents, I mean, it's almost a parody of colonialism, definitely a satire on it. When he just wants to wipe out the enemies so he can surf, and he doesn't respect the enemy because they don't surf. Like, just utterly ridiculous and extremely on brand for any colonialist. It's fantastic. Everyone has seen this, I'm sure. It's just an unbelievable performance. It was so good that at least one other actor in their acceptance speech at the Oscars said, "I couldn't believe Robert Duvall didn't win." We know that it's held up today. It's considered one of the most iconic movie characters of all time. Like I said, two of the most voted lines in film. So obviously it stood the test of time. I think everything about this film has, but yeah, you need that Kilgore character early on before it gets more and more psychologically horrifying. He feels more like a traditional war film character, but you go deeper and deeper, and it feels less and less like your traditional kind of war film. So he's a good starter villain essentially. And number one, a lot of these I was moving around. I had no question about this. Number one, Robert Duvall performance, The Apostle. This is a 1997 film directed, written, starring Robert Duvall, where he plays Sonny Dewey, a Southern revival preacher who goes on the run after assaulting his wife's boyfriend in very public event and starts a new church in the middle of nowhere until he gets caught. Essentially, he knows the police might come for him at some point, but he still goes on, tries to start a new life with that in the back of his mind at all times. This was an absolute passion project for Robert Duvall, and only difference between a passion project and a vanity project is quality, and this is a quality film. He funded a lot of this himself. He studied the revival preachers in the South and really nailed this specific kind of character. The scenes in which he's really getting into it, it's unlike anything he's done before or after anyone has. This is so unlike any of his other performances because he's so unbelievably charismatic and likable in those scenes, and he wins over so many people in this movie, despite the fact that when he's not in preaching mode, he's a real piece of work. He's not a good guy, but he wins them over, and it's not one of those one note characters because the movie grapples with the fact that he's not a good person, but he affects a lot of good people in a positive way. And what do you do with that? This is an unconventional movie. I know structurally, if it was a studio movie, it would have been cut down a bit, and I won't act like it's not a little long, but it's okay. I like every minute we get of Duvall in this because he's so amazing. There's a good supporting cast here as well. Miranda Richardson is in there. Farrah Fawcett. Walton Goggins has an early performance in it too. Maybe his first. John Beasley is the actor who plays the other minister in this, and he's really good too. It's mostly a Duvall one man show here, and it's just some of the best acting you're ever going to see. Such, again, I said lived in character for Tender Mercies. And again, he so understands this very specific kind of person. I think he grew up with a lot of this from what I heard him talk about. He's talked about this movie a fair bit. It obviously meant a lot to him. Grew up with revival preachers, things like that. He really understands like the cadence and the physicality of when a preacher's really getting into it. And it never feels like a stereotype. It never feels like a cliche. And it's just one of those performances that there's nothing to compare it to. If I was talking about the top performances from any actor in any film, this would be in my top 10 favorites. It's just amazing work. I'm glad that it got made. I'm glad he was able to make this the way he wanted to. That's really important. And I wish more films about faith were like this because if they were, I think we wouldn't have as much of a problem with what now has become a self genre of faith-based films. But no, it's a complicated, nuanced film that asks a lot of questions. It doesn't leave you with many answers. But I just think of that last scene in the movie when the cops are coming for him and he's having the biggest revival service he's had yet, and they're dancing and singing, and he's just saying his goodbyes to everybody because he knows obviously it's the last time he's going to see any of them. The work he's doing in that scene in particular is the best of his career. It's heartbreaking and sad and a little funny and just utterly brilliant. So yeah, The Apostle. If you haven't seen it, it's like I said, it's a little unconventional, but one of those interesting '90s movies when it felt like in the wake of Fargo, there were a lot of kind of middle America character pieces with a lot of quirkiness. It's a little bit like that. So it's not like Fargo specifically, but it's that kind of like Sling Blade, Fargo, middle America character piece era, A Simple Plan. I love a lot of these films, and it feels very much in that model. Again, it's Robert Duvall's vision. They don't give actors Oscars for directing themselves. It's never happened. It should have in this case. But usually actors aren't going to win an Oscar for a film they directed themselves. And it's one of those weird Academy things that when you notice that you can't unsee it, like, oh, they've never actually, Bradley Cooper hasn't done it, others haven't done it. He was nominated for this. I think it was just underseen, but it's just an amazing performance. If you haven't seen The Apostle, give yourself some time, tribute to the great Robert Duvall, and check it out. Obviously, I would go endlessly with honorable mentions, but I'll give a few here. Few small, essentially cameo roles here that I want to mention. Thank You for Smoking. He has a fun little part in that. Obviously, his first role in To Kill a Mockingbird. A great small scene in Sling Blade. A movie I almost included here, but I couldn't quite bring myself to, The Conversation, where he's just in a couple scenes, but he's so chilling. That's a great movie, obviously. And a few other leading roles that I considered or thought about, but I know I couldn't really include. 7% Solution, a very fun Sherlock Holmes movie where he's Dr. Watson, which is fascinating casting, but he pulls it off. Secondhand Lions, which may have been the first thing I saw him in. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was that Twilight Zone episode or this, but charming little movie with Michael Caine, Haley Joel Osment, and Kira Sedgwick. I haven't seen it since I was like, early teenager, but I remember liking it then. And yeah, Duvall and Michael Caine are wonderful. Great Santini. I'm sure a lot of people would bet on their list. It's basically what if Bill Kilgore had his own movie at home, and it's the 2 hours of Robert Duvall being an abusive father. So he's good at it, but it's not exactly a fun watch. But no, he was nominated for that for an Oscar. and rightly so. He's great in it, but just missed my list. And his other Academy Award nomination was for The Judge, which is The Choice. I could go on. He's made so many incredible movies. He always gave his best, and he always turned in great work. So yeah, I just wanted to do a little episode talking about him. Leave some comments about your favorites because I'm always open to more. I want to talk about more other ones that I didn't get to or I haven't seen even. Please let me know, and we'll talk about some Robert Duvall movies in the comments. So this is not my main episode for the month. I just wanted to put this out in addition to the others, kind of talk off the cuff about one of my favorite actors. So thank you for listening.